My name is Sathia, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. For sure, it's been a highlight of my week and probably the month. And I don't take for granted that it's a great privilege to stand here before you and share some information. So thank you for your time, and thank you for being here and your attention over this next few minutes. And I really hope you find some value. You enjoy the talk, and the team and I are here, and we'd love to have a chat with you, get to know you a little bit better later on. So like I said, I'm Sathia, and I have the greatest pleasure at Saint-Gobain Africa to lead technical and academy teams. And what we do is collaborate daily with purpose-driven and passionate teammates, and do our little bit to ensure that we're facilitating a sustainable and a beautiful future and built environment. So that's a brief introduction. And let's get started, and let's test the clicker. Good. All right, the agenda. So 3 key focus areas for this session. Major trends for sustainable construction. But before we go to major trends for sustainable construction, I think it's important just to set the scene, provide a little bit of context. However, I have no doubt that there's experts among us here today, so you'll bear with me as we go through the context and setting the scene. And then the second part of the talk is the findings from our recent barometer. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about the Sustainable Construction Observatory and the findings from the barometer. And lastly, and very importantly, something that I'm exceptionally passionate about, contractor care and training of installers and applicators. And we'll go through a few slides. So many of you will be very familiar with this slide and this image, and I think it's been shared widely at various platforms over the years, and a lovely place to start. An excerpt from Our Common Future from 1987, describing what sustainable development is. And essentially, we're all aligning that it's ensuring that we develop today, ensuring that our children and children's children can also do the same as they progress. But why do we need to do this? And this is very much what sustainable construction is all about. We cannot do what we've been doing over the years to ensure that we have a planet that's sustainable for future generations. And that's about building differently and renovating differently and deconstructing differently. Let's look back into the last century, often referred to as the great acceleration of the 20th century. And you'll see that the last 100 years has been a period of time where population has grown rapidly. We've just passed the 8 billion mark, and by 2050, for sure, we're going to reach 9 billion. But with this has come considerable changes in the way that we extract materials, construct buildings, so effectively changes in our construction and production patterns. And we need to adapt. As people, we need to adapt, and buildings need to adapt. The built environment needs to adapt to these changes in temperatures, fires, and droughts and storms and floodings. And most of us here will agree that buildings are part of the problem. These figures are staggering, and the good news is that relative to other sectors, construction has a big impact with the relatively low effort in terms of reducing carbon emissions and reducing our reliance on resources. In the last several years, a growing body of evidence is indicating that the air we breathe indoors is much more polluted than the air outdoors. even in the most industrialized of cities. So we've set the scene, and I trust you'll allow me to just in a minute share with you our purpose. Just as an example of how we believe we can contribute towards this more sustainable construction and the sustainable built environment. So we're driven by our purpose, and that purpose is making the world a better home. And when you speak to individuals about how they'd like to see the future, you hear that we'd like a happier and a healthier world for our kids and their kids, a more beautiful, a more sustainable future. And at Saint-Gobain, we believe that we can all contribute to make the world a better home. Our sustainability strategy translates this purpose. This is how we see the definition of sustainable construction and constructing a sustainable future. Two key pillars, sustainability and performance. For those of you who's wondering when I'm going to get to those major challenges that I spoke about, they're coming soon. And we're going to be able to link these very beautifully. Sustainability and performance. But when we're speaking sustainability, sometimes we have to be conscious to remind ourselves that we need to create spaces that are better for the planet, but also better for people. And here we see on the left and the right focusing on better for planet and better for people. From a performance perspective, delivering better economic value to owners, developers, architects and designers, as well as reliability. So in essence, over their entire life cycle, buildings should deliver enhanced performance that accelerates people's health and well-being and deliver this better economic value. And here we are, the major trends. So I give you 2 seconds to look at the screen. So those concerns that I mentioned earlier are leading us to these challenges for the construction markets. Challenges and opportunities. So buildings have to take care of people, and buildings have to take care of the environment. These are the major trends that we've identified globally. Energy and carbon, resources and circularity, health and well-being. Right? Buildings that are better for people, health and well-being, and those other 2 major challenges, ensuring that buildings that are better for the planet. So let's focus on energy and carbon. So you'll see some of the statistics here. 33% of energy consumption, 39% greenhouse gas emissions. The built environment and buildings have a key role to play in the decarbonization of the built environment. But what's the challenge here? The challenge is to reduce carbon emissions over the entire life cycle. And we're referring to extraction of raw materials, transportation of these raw materials to production facilities, in the manufacture process, on the way to the building site, constructing, installing the materials during the operational phase, and then deconstruction. In the past 50 years, the carbon emissions associated with buildings has reached unprecedented levels. Still on carbon, energy and carbon and energy, just let's look at a few of those key drivers. Increased energy efficiency. So here we're referring to a fabric-first approach. Highly performing facades, roofs, building envelope. Because what that'll do is reduce the need for heating and cooling passively. Increased use of renewable energies. So looking at the supply of energy from renewable and decarbonized sources as well as locally produced energy. Reduced embodied carbon, so focusing on building products. On the one hand, we have operational carbon and we have to address embodied carbon as well. Looking at eco-innovation of building materials and the role that they have to play. We need to start looking at buildings as material banks. So buildings that can facilitate change of use, change of function, and reusing of those materials when we reach the end of that phase. Very quickly, some solutions addressing energy and carbon. So we spoke about a fabric-first approach, glass wool insulation, walls, roofs, floors. And how are we ensuring that we're reducing embodied energy in our materials? Increasing the amount of recycled raw materials. Increasing the amount of recycled raw materials means we're using less energy to produce the products. Less carbon emissions associated with the manufacture process. Reduced energy and carbon at the extraction of raw materials, at the manufacture of the product, at the transportation level and stages, as well as on-site. So we're looking at products that can improve performance across installation, performance across logistics, performance in terms of usability and application, all with the goal of reducing our energy and carbon. The next one, resources and circularity. Again, you see those figures. Buildings have a key role to play in circular economy. What's the challenge here? To design less resource-intensive buildings and to divert waste from landfill, to ensure that at the end of life, all that construction and demolition waste doesn't just go to landfill, but rather to ensure that we're contributing towards a circular economy. Very quickly, let's take sand for an example. We're running out of building sand. In the last 30 years, the demand for building sand has increased by 360%. Only 5% of the sand that we have on the planet can be used for construction. We have to start thinking about these things differently as we continue to re-engineer our products and our systems. Still on resources and circularity, some of the key drivers. We need to move from a linear to a circular economy. The selection of the right materials at the various stages of the construction process is important. Reduce freshwater consumption, ensuring that we're aiming for autonomy in buildings when it comes to water supply. Increase lifetime and use rate. So earlier I spoke about facilitating change of use. So building can go very quickly from a residential building to a commercial building. At design stage, to ensure that systems and products that we select can facilitate that transition. Increase service life of products and systems. Reducing the amount of non-recovered construction and demolition waste. So putting processes in place where we continue to separate waste on site to ensure that a particular building product can be used in another sector or to be reintroduced into the construction stage. An indicator here would be the percentage of construction and demolition waste diverted from landfill. Again, just very briefly, some solutions linked to resources and circularity. Lighter construction. We're transporting more square meters to sites with the less carbon emissions associated with transportation. Solutions that deliver improved performance and yet facilitates ease of application for installers and applicators of our products. Increasing the amount of recycled content and waste materials into our products that facilitates resource and circularity. The third major challenge we spoke about was health and well-being. And when we're speaking about health and well-being for people, we're referring to the applicators and the installers of building products and systems, as well as the occupants for building. Here we're looking at job sites specifically, and the challenge here is reducing the risks for installers and applicators. What are those risks? Respiratory diseases, musculoskeletal diseases. How do we address those? Reducing the exposure to hazardous substances, ensuring that there's no substances of very high concern. Products and systems that are usable, that are easy to apply. Improve working conditions, lighter systems, easier to handle systems, non-irritant product and systems. An indicator here would be lowering the risk of occupational disease or accidents, facilitating safer job sites. Still on people, we go to the occupants of the building. And here, buildings have a fundamental role to play across all of the sectors. The challenge here, buildings should deliver improved performance. Buildings should deliver improved comfort, and buildings should deliver improved well-being. And I think if we say that again, it might seem arrogant that we believe that buildings can. But research indicates that if we look at acoustic comfort, children in a room that's treated acoustically perform up to 15% better than children who don't. If you look at the healthcare sector, where acoustic concerns is a consideration at the design stage, we know that it facilitates healing, facilitates communication between healthcare workers. And we need to do that across 4 comfort criteria, because we know that we describe a beautiful building or a nice building through our senses. How do we feel, and how do we hear, and what do we see, and what do we smell? Improved indoor air quality, building materials, and building systems have a role to play to facilitate cleaner air. Better acoustics we spoke about. Better thermal comfort, we know that we're more productive when we're more comfortable in a space. And visual comfort, ensuring that there's views to outdoors so that you can maintain your biological clock. Some of the solutions here linked to health and safety on job sites, lighter systems, and again, ease of application, ease of transportation, low dust technology, minimizing respiratory accidents, diseases, incidences. Passive systems, plasterboard systems that can keep occupants and users of buildings safer for longer. So I used this slide here intentionally to not sort of break the presentation, but to conclude those major challenges that we spoke about. And from here forward, we look at a few slides to say, what are we going to do about those? And I thought it's fitting that we see sustainable construction as a strategic business response, as a strategic responsibility, because we're all aware of these global challenges that we're all faced at varying degrees across the planet. We know that we're in a more urbanized world. We know that megacities are on the rise. We know that 70% of people will be living in urban areas, and the need for residential and housing and accommodation is a significant concern. It's a strategic answer that we respond to these changes in climate and resource scarcity, as well as health and well-being. And that brings me to a Sustainable Construction Observatory. So I mentioned earlier that we'd like to share some of the findings from the recent barometer. So the barometer was a survey that was conducted, the very first one, but the barometer is only one element of the Sustainable Construction Observatory, which is part of a broader ecosystem. And why a Sustainable Construction Observatory? because we're determined to play a key role in the transformation of the built environment, an acceleration towards lighter and more sustainable construction. And the observatory was developed on 3 fundamental pillars. And the first one is to listen. So to take the pulse of the construction industry across a wide spectrum of stakeholders across the globe. And then to share that information. So that's listen. The second pillar is to inform. And when we go through the slides, we see that awareness and training, collaboration on sustainable construction and constructing a sustainable future is a need. And then the last one is to unite or federate. And that's ensuring that we're facilitating dialogue at these major platforms that can identify areas in specific regions where we need to focus on area-specific concerns. So the barometer was released in April this year. It's the first one that I mentioned, and the aim here is to do the survey on an annual basis and share the data. So we're going to go through a few slides, the results of the survey. An independent research agency, the CSA, was appointed to conduct the survey between November and December. More than 800 respondents in 10 countries. And we received data from architects, elected officials, and students, and applicators, member organizations, trade associations. The key results here, 2 main findings and 3 levers to act. So I'm going to go through them, not quickly. I'll go through them briefly, but I'll encourage you, so I don't have a QR code for you to scan, but I'll encourage you to go to website of Sustainable Construction Observatory and click barometer, and you have the detail of the findings. And the first one is that sustainable construction is seen as a priority throughout the world. And that's the good news, right? So we're starting with good news. However, there's some work to be done because the definition needs to be harmonized. And we'll see in the data a little bit about what that means. The second one, operation reality contrasts with the awareness of the urgency to act. So although it's seen as a priority, when asked the question of, will you say no to working on a building that is not seen as construction, the answer isn't yes all the time. 3 levers to act. So here's where we all have a role to play, because we're all agents of change in this transformation of the construction sector. We all have a role to play. And the barometer starts giving us some clues of what we can do in terms of having the biggest impact with the lowest efforts. And the first one is competitiveness of solutions. Again, we'll go through a few slides unpacking that a bit more. The next one, the key role of public policies and funding, and then the need to support all actors in the sector. And now we start to see how the barometer is addressing some of these concerns already in its first issue. We're looking at familiarity. And yes, we're going to focus on that 88%, the good news. But we see that 12% of respondents are saying that they've never heard of sustainable construction, if only by name. There's some work to be done. However, we can identify that more than half of the respondents are saying that they're savvy in sustainable construction. So we mentioned the first key takeaway was priority, and we see here that 97% of the respondents are indicating that we should be implementing more, we should be doing more, we should be going forward. But if you look at the little graph on the side, is that on the right, and that one is focusing on professionals, and we see that with professionals it's only 63%. So there's some work to be done. So we're seeing that there's some key cues and clues that are coming out of the survey or the barometer this year. We saw it earlier, 97% of the actors, they see construction as a priority. But when we spoke to some public officials in a few countries, although we're seeing it as a priority, these officials are saying that we could still work on buildings that are not considered sustainable. There's some work to be done there. Now we're moving to those identified levers that we're all going to work toward. So overall, there were 6 perceived obstacles. But the number one lever that we can act on here is cost. So sustainable construction is still perceived to be more expensive. And I think that there's some awareness that needs to be done to demonstrate total cost, overall cost, operational costs, and the value that sustainable construction and building materials and systems bring. The second is the lack of training and qualification of professionals. And this one, although it's second globally, in the emerging countries, Brazil, South Africa, and India, this was the number one lever. So when we localize it, we see that for us, lack of training and qualification of professionals is number one. And students as well, but we'll see that in a bit. The main levers for action: access to competitive solutions, regulations and standards. Survey respondents are indicating that sometimes we're underestimating the role of building regulations, guidelines, and push from government. I don't have the slide in this presentation, but most of us would be familiar with the push and the pull. And often we're focusing on the pull, the innovators at the front. But the survey is indicating that there's lots of work and lots of focus that we should be putting on regulations. This one was quite interesting. In your opinion, which of the following are best placed to drive forward sustainable construction? So overall, it was public institutions. And interestingly enough, in the emerging countries, it was elected officials. However, both American, European, as well as the emerging markets agree that private companies have a significant role to play. And I think it's exciting because it presents an opportunity for a lot of us here. The need to raise awareness across all stakeholders. And we're drawing to the close of the presentation. You can see here that the need for information is generally obvious. 64% of us saying that. Yes, absolutely, and yes, reasonably. I think it's important to note that the orange parts of the slide, the 8% and the 28%, raises a concern. The feeling of the lack of awareness or the lack of information, the lack of training is felt more in emerging markets. And again, those countries were Brazil, South Africa, and India. It presents an opportunity for us. We're zooming in here to professionals and students who are indicating that there's a need for more training. And with professionals and with students, we have a role to play. With students, although it looks as if that 80% is encouraging, 20% of students are saying no, not at all. Many of us here probably have an opportunity where we're engaging with students. Right now, we have the architecture student contest where every year we gather more than 2,000 students across the globe, 30 countries, developing sustainable buildings. And I think it's platforms that those that can provide awareness and more information to students and get professionals involved. So those were some of the key findings from the barometer. I trust you all were as excited as I was when I saw those for the first time. And next, I just want to spend a little bit speaking about the digital magazine. So earlier I mentioned the Sustainable Construction Observatory. We did the barometer, addressing listen, an annual publication. The magazine is intended to be a monthly publication. So analysis and reports, podcasts, videos, interviews, with a focus on constructing a sustainable future. For those of you who are really excited and would like to take a look, I'll share with you the link. All right, just come chat to me after. Looking forward to. And you can sign up for the newsletter, and then you receive the monthly newsletter as it's published. Right, the exciting bit, contractor care. The results of the surveys are indicating that we need more awareness, we need more training, and we need qualification. I'm at the start of the presentation, I said I have a great pleasure of leading technical and academy teams. This is part of what we do. So we invite installers and applicators in various trades across. Here you see our champion gift, tile adhesives and tile grouts, self-leveling screeds. We offer training across ceiling systems and insulation, drywall systems. We have networking events where we engage with our installers, and we try and understand how we can make installation and applications easier. Build relationships with our installers at our networking events. And again, here, if anybody's interested, don't hesitate to connect with me. We'd be very happy to host you at our facility in Germiston, and we've got a fantastic team there ready to meet you.